Hi, everyone. Thanks so much to the Outlier team for having me. My name is Sara Stoudt. I teach at Bucknell University, and today I'm going to be talking about opening the door, designing data visualizations to spark creative writing. So, where does this open the door expression come from? It comes from actually a quote by Roger Peng in a blog post when he was talking about explaining the narrative of a data analysis. He says, a data analysis can fail if it doesn't present a coherent story and close all the doors. This was about trying to avoid people saying, like, oh, what if you did this? Did you try this? Why did you not try this? You really have to sort of like close those doors preemptively if you're trying to do something explaining wise. But on the other side, when we think about exploring data, this quote from Amanda Cox at the New York Times says, you're on your own in finding the story when you're thinking about these data explorers that are interactive, but don't have a lot of guidelines, right? You can sort of go find the story. She later goes on to say, if you don't know what you're looking for, changing the form can help you find the story. So those are really setting up the two ends of the spectrum I'm thinking about here. If we're trying to explain data versus letting people explore data, how might data visualizations change depending on what we're trying to do? And more specifically, my setting is trying to make it easier to discover data-driven detail in environmental data to inspire eco-writing. So this comes from trying to break the barrier between being sort of a numbers person and a writing person, and thinking about how data is actually really rich in thinking about helping us build a story. It can give us characters, setting, lots of sort of real sort of detail that can really make a story compelling. And eco-writing is a cool place to start because it involves writing about the environment, but also how people and the environment sort of interact. But if you're trying to approach environmental data, there's tons of it, right? We could just go to something like the GBIF that has billions of occurrence records of various species, but that's super overwhelming, right? Even if you access just one of the data sets in this database, something like iNaturalist, which is a bunch of records of various species across the globe, we're still looking at millions, billions, even records. And so if you're not familiar with the more data side of things, you might be overwhelmed in trying to access that data-driven detail. Can we make that process easier? So we want to ease the way into the data, right? And that's going to involve some design. How might we guide attention in some sort of interactive applet, sort of like a data explorer, but not overprescribe the storyline? We still want to make it open and generative to a wide variety of people and a wide variety of stories. So one approach is to experiment with scale when finding the way into the data. So we can think about starting with a data point and then zooming out, adding context. So here's just a simple map of great white shark sightings on iNaturalist. You can notice this one data point that seems sort of out of place. Not any other sharks were reported there at any time point. So that might be the way into the story. What's going on with that shark? A writing prompt might target that as the character, what's going on from that point of view, and then you sort of zoom out and build context from there. This is a really accessible data visualization. It's a map. Maybe people aren't even thinking of this as data, and this can be a way in. But we can also do the flip of this, right? You start big and help people narrow things down. So here we have data from the National Park Service about different types of animals found in different national parks. So I might be interested in mammals. I can sort of get a high level overview of a bunch of different parks and how many mammals are sort of present there. And then we want to allow people to sort of dig in further, narrow their way in. Maybe I want to look at very specific national parks. I care about Grand Canyon National Park and Yosemite. I might want to say, okay, what animals do they have in common? Which animals do they have separate? We could sort of see that. They have some that are the same, some are different. And now, of course, I might want to know what are those species. So we can see they have things like the coyote and the bobcat in common. So you can think of a writing prompt that might focus on sort of the intersection of these things. What if they were going from place to place? What might that look like? And so we've sort of identified characters by helping people narrow in on the story they're interested in. Or we could have many different stories by looking at different types of species, different parks, etc. You might also care about what's in one park but not the other. So you might say, okay, there's a American bison in one and a bighorn sheep in another. And so another prompt might try to sort of think about those two species as different and sort of like iconic sort of representatives of their parks and how that might play out into a story. And this gives them that concrete detail without having to sort of like go through all of the weeds of that data themselves. Another approach is to tie the interactive toggles of something like this applet to potential storylines directly. Here we have data on two different deer being tracked across space and time. And so we might think about how we might slice the data this way. You know how much they're stepping by step traveling, but you also know cumulatively how far they've traveled. And maybe that cumulative distance gets at this sort of energy level. You sort of feel your story losing steam and sort of replicating that in the process. Or maybe I want to slice by a time period. I only want to care about the deer's sort of weekend life. And now we can sort of lean on that eco fiction. How might we sort of relate human sort of relationships to the weekend with deer relationships? What's the Sunday scaries, TGIF look like from a deer point of view? So we can sort of really tie these slices or the way into the data to something directly tied to the storyline. And then, sort of bigger picture, we can encourage changes in points of view. So, all of these data sets that I've shown today are about nature, but they're collected by people. And so, when we consider the data collector as character, that also opens up some interesting opportunities. That sense of absence in the data might not reflect the true absence of the species. Maybe the person didn't see it. Maybe they did see it, but chose not to report it for some reason, right? So, this sort of broadens the storyline of thinking about what does missingness mean in this context, either from a sort of people point of view or a species point of view, but also what does it mean not to be counted? We can sort of engage with these deeper connections with the data just by thinking about the data generating process. So these are the things we're thinking about. This is a to be continued effort, and it's a team effort. I'm working with some students at Bucknell, some faculty in the Department of English, and we're partnering with the Dodge, an eco-writing literary magazine, to try to get these data applets in front of writers to see what might their approach be to these applets and how can we sort of design it to really make it useful for them. We're trying to tie this data, so other data sets we might be interested in, but also prompts that actually sort of are generative and sort of really engage this audience. So this is a plug to watch this space. You can try out the applets as they are now at this GitHub link and sort of get a feel. If you write anything or you have any data sets or prompts in mind, please reach out. I'd love to hear some feedback, suggestions, etc. And with that, I'll stop there. Thank you very much.